What's up, everybody? Good Friday morning. Hope you're off to a good start to your Friday. And today we're going to kind of take things a little bit easy. We're going to go into something that you've got to be a little bit of a nerd to really think about. You've got to be pretty deep into this stuff to really pay any mind to things like this. So, we're obviously headed into one of the slowest parts of the off season. I've talked about it before. You have OTAs, but you're not necessarily going to learn a ton from OTAs. Most of the stuff you see is probably going to look pretty good, and that doesn't mean it's going to continue to look good when the actual games start. Honestly, when it comes to OTAs, no news is often good news. No news means no injuries, right? So, as far as OTAs go, yeah, there's going to be some stuff to take away from it for sure. And I will report on things as I see fit. But for the most part, we're just chilling right now. I got a couple more videos left in the Look Ahead to 2023 series. And I will be putting those out in the coming days, possibly both over the weekend. But today I want to talk about some of the new roster management rules from the NFL. And these are things that a lot of people probably don't really pay any attention to. This is not about your studs, right? This doesn't affect your DK Metcalfs. This doesn't affect your Jordan Brookses or Daryl Taylors. This kind of stuff affects the people at the bottom of the depth chart. This kind of stuff affects your Derek Youngs, your Bo Meltons, your DJ Dallases and Josh Johnsons. Guys that most Seahawks fans are not going to think about very much, even though they are Seahawks players. So this is not going to be for everyone, but I always like to keep an eye on the NFL's ever changing roster management rules. And there have been a few adjustments this offseason for 2022. So I want to talk about them just a little bit and what they might mean for this team. A couple videos ago, I mentioned that it was already established that the general rules for the rosters, in terms of size, cut down dates, cut down numbers, and practice squad size, was going to remain the same. 53-man roster, which I've talked about it before. I feel like it's time to expand the roster size by a couple spots because they're adding an extra game, but hasn't happened yet. They are keeping the practice squad at 16, and they have cut down dates of, I believe, to 85 after the first preseason game, 80 after the second one, and then 53 after the third one. So that stuff has remained the same. Also remaining the same is the practice squad is still 16 players. However, there are some adjustments that I want to go over because every little thing can affect the way in which your team ends up getting run. So, players placed on injured reserve now miss a minimum of 4 games instead of 3. To my memory, the IR being a minimum of 3 games thing was relatively recent. I think it had something to do with COVID. So now that we're getting to a point where players missing multiple games because of COVID is becoming less likely to happen because theoretically we should be beyond the worst of that in terms of actually forcing players to miss time. It makes sense that you would send it back to 4 games. I think before it was 6, if I recall correctly. So it's still less than it was before. So basically, that means if a player suffers a significant but not major injury, they will have to sit out for a little bit longer, which, depending on the nature of the injury, is either not really going to change anything or it's going to cost them an additional game they wouldn't have otherwise had to miss. I don't. It's hard to know how this is going to affect anything one way or the other. Up to 8 players can be designated to return from IR. I don't know what it was before, but basically it means like I said, if a player suffers a significant injury that is going to cost them some games but not the whole season, you can put them on the IR with designated to return status and they become no longer part of your roster, but you can re-add them to the roster later in the season. Also, players can come back from IR twice in 1 year. Before, I think it was one. So that's a little bit of an interesting change, if so. It just gives players more opportunities to not have to miss the whole season because of an injury. If Abraham Lucas has an injury that takes him out for 4 weeks in week 3, he can come back after week 6 and continue to play. Or, well, actually, it would be after week 7 and keep playing. And then a couple weeks later, maybe he has another injury that knocks him out for a few games. He can come back for the end of the season. Now, at that point, you'd probably be more annoyed than anything else that he keeps getting hurt. But hey, at least you could get him back before the season ends because we're trying to get as much familiarity with these players as possible. So, like I said before I started looking at this tweet, the teams can have up to 16 players on the practice squad, and I would expect most teams to utilize all 16 of those spots, so that hasn't changed, but the details of the practice squad have. So we have this tweet from Bob Condota. Teams can now elevate practice squad players 3 times a year. So if we put Derek Young on our practice squad, and some people were saying if we put Derek Young on the practice squad, he's going to get poached, which maybe. But let's say we put Derek Young on the practice squad, and maybe Tyler Lockett has a little nagging injury, and we decide to hold him out for a game, and we want to call up players, and we call up Derek Young. And then maybe a month later, you've got Freddie Swain. He can't play in a game, and you need to call somebody up. Maybe you call up Derek Young. And then maybe at the end of the season, maybe like week 17 or something, oh, okay, now it's DK Metcalf. The playoffs are out of the picture anyway. Season's basically over. We're playing out the string. He's got something going on. Let's have him sit out a game to get right. Let's have him sit out maybe both games. But that first game, you could call up Derek Young again. And that's where this can actually be really valuable. That is an extra game worth of opportunity for each player on our practice squad. And you look at our practice squad, what our practice squad is probably going to be. You're going to see a lot of guys that have very little upside and are just there to be on the practice squad. But I think most teams' practice squads have at least 1 or 2 guys who actually have some roster upside. You look at them and you go, that guy might actually be on the active roster one day. And I don't know who ours are going to be. We've got some guys at receiver. Like everything I just said about Derek Young can equally apply to Aaron Fuller. He could get some opportunities because of the extra elevation. Maybe a guy like Pierre-Olivier Lestage gets an extra chance because of the extra elevation. So that's something I really like. And that is really the main change that has come from this, I think. There was also apparently now you can have as many as 6 veterans on your practice squad instead of, I think the limit before was like 4. So this will increase your opportunities to have a player who's got some decent NFL experience on your practice squad. Typically, practice squads have 1 or 2 guys with a decent chunk of NFL experience. I think it has to be like 2 or more years, but now you can have as many as 6. So that's going to improve the ability of us to keep a guy like, I don't know, maybe LJ Collier on the practice squad. If we don't feel like he can play or positively contribute, but we don't want to cut him, then maybe you can utilize a practice squad spot on somebody like that. So every little spot is valuable, and I wanted to talk about what all this means. So I'll see you guys later on. Might stream night tonight, might not. Peace out. Go Ox. Let me know what you think, if anything.